Kate, can I kick off with you? Why are we here? Why are we discussing this? What are the benefits to musicians in being able to tour the EU? Why do you want to do it?
I have a lot to say about this.
Okay, good.
On the personal front and professional. So I think personally, being able to tour in other countries has helped me develop my skills as a performer. I think performing in other countries makes you a more dynamic performer. There's a cultural exchange that I think is really important. It gives me context for a wider world. I'm able to learn from others in their place of work. Also, I think that, British culture, we like to see ourselves as sort of the centre of being like at the cutting edge of music. That's never more present than at festivals like Glastonbury, and I think historically we've been celebrated around the world for like our contribution to music. And being able to tour and have opportunities to profit from tour in other countries around the world, including Europe, if we have less opportunities to do that, I think we're at risk of losing that reputation, that status, that sense of pride in our culture. And also, I think it will have a knock-on effect on the UK economy. And I can tell you why I think that there's a direct link there. But the more we limit artists in this sense, the more that we limit UK culture on a global scale. I think, that I see music as a source of joy, and I like to spread joy around the world. I think there's validity to that. I've seen people grow in confidence at shows. I've seen people find communities in cities that they don't necessarily have their own community. I believe in diversity being a positive thing, and I think becoming more worldly has informed me and made me a smarter, more sensitive, more empathetic person and a better employer. I also see music as a work and as work and as a job. It is my job. I'm a working musician, and touring in Europe and growing my fan base there has in the past been profitable for me, and is less profitable for me now. It's much more difficult for me to make a profit in Europe and in the UK as a touring artist. And touring does build fan bases. So when people come to my show and see me as a live artist, whether they were already interested in my music or maybe they've come with a friend, maybe they've seen me at a festival, that grows me as a live artist, but also as a recorded artist. My recorded work is more listened to around the world, which is why I'm sort of linking, there is a direct link, and it is an ecosystem between recorded work and live work. When we go out and tour, we're promoting our recorded music. We're actually promoting UK culture. I have contributed significantly to UK culture. I think we could all agree. I've won a Brit Award. I've made the company Universal a lot of money. I still make them a lot of money to this day, even though I'm not signed to them anymore. And if I had not toured my first record made of bricks, there's no way that impact would have been as significant. I make the streaming companies money, even though my share of the profits, in my opinion, are too low and unethical. And these companies are major companies in the UK. They make a huge contribution to the UK economy. And if people around the world, including in Europe, cannot see us live, and we lose the ability to promote ourselves, those streaming numbers will go down. And I think that will have a negative impact on the UK economy. Music, I think, brings in roughly, the last figure I read was about 8 billion a year to the economy, so that's significant. And I think the ethics of recorded music is relevant to this, because we are paid so unfairly for our recorded music, and we were told for a long time that was okay because we made money from touring. Well, now it's really difficult for us to make money from touring. The last European tour that I went on, I lost, I think, 26 grand. And the last UK tour that I went on, I lost about 13 grand. 6 days before the tour in Europe, I had to let go of a crew member. It was around Christmas. I felt terrible about this. But I was doing everything I could to cut costs, which I also really dislike as an employer, because I don't want to do anything to sacrifice the integrity of my show. I think, having been an artist for 20 years, having the success that I do, the fan base that I do, selling thousands of tickets, having millions of streams, I'm within my rights to protect that integrity. And just to make it really simple, I wish I could fly across the stage like a Beyonce or something, but I can't. If I had the budget, I would. But to me, the integrity of my show comes down to having 3 band members, a drummer, bassist, guitarist, a sound engineer, a lighting engineer, a tour manager, a guitar tech, who's someone who'll be on stage in case anything goes wrong during the show. I think that's pretty integral. Sometimes a photographer, and that's it. And that causes extreme losses on the road in 2025, which is when I was last touring. I think that music should not be exclusive. I think it's for all. And it does become an issue of class. Becomes an issue of race, gender, sexuality, and identity, because the doors are fast closing on who can choose to take such a financial risk. That's really real. If a younger, newer artist doesn't already have disposable income, I really don't understand how they would be able to do shows in the UK, let alone shows in Europe. I think there's a pipeline that we're not really thinking through about the future of UK music, about how we're actually seen culturally around the world. And I think they're going to tour in Europe to have cultural exchange, to develop our talent, our skill. I would not be the artist that I am today had I not done 20 years of touring. And, now the only reason it's possible for me to keep doing that, even though I have Made of Bricks in my catalogue, is I sell pictures of my bum on the internet. I started an OnlyFans account during my last touring cycle to get some attention on the issue, which it did. I was in every newspaper in the country, because I think I myself and a lot of artists are quite sick of screaming into the void about how difficult it is. So I'm so grateful to be here and to be included in this conversation, because I'm really, really passionate about what I do. And I think music is really important. I'm sure you do as well. I think most people do. And I think that anything that we can do to make it easier to put on shows in Europe will make a significant difference. And I hope that I can help explain what's behind that on this entire broken ecosystem, and why Brexit has also made some things more difficult. And if we could, find some solutions, that would really be helpful, because it's extremely difficult right now for artists.
Thank you for setting it out so beautifully for us.
Kate, how are musicians making up for loss of income and that experience and exposure that touring in the EU brings?
Well, as I said, I'm selling pictures of myself on the internet on OnlyFans. Without doing that, I chose to do that because it also got a lot of media attention.
Yeah, you mentioned that was about attention, but it's also about recouping the money.
Genuinely needing the finances, yeah. I was on tour. I was promoting a record, and my album had come out that year. I had a North American tour, a European tour, and a UK tour. And I described touring a little bit like building, I suppose, where you're sort of like, this is how much it's going to cost. And obviously live events and things that happen can change the budget as you go. And I think I didn't really believe how dire the situation was. But after being on the road for a while and sort of doing the numbers, I had, I think, 5 days in between 2 tours. And I was really stressing about, how am I going to pay all of my invoices before Christmas? Really, because of all these sort of like additional factors and things that can come, into play, because of how much the landscape has changed. And I thought, I can't really get an acting job in 5 days and shoot something. I'm doing my actual job, which is where I'm supposed to be earning the money and being able to pay for this. I'm streaming millions of, streams, and it doesn't add up. And so I thought, this is something I could do quite quickly, make an impact, talk about the problem, and financially it really did help me. I know people that are selling all of their instruments, selling their things in their home, selling furniture, picking up second and third jobs if they can. You might not be able to if you're on tour. I don't know how you could work another job, unless it's something like OnlyFans. And if you have disposable income already because of privilege, then you're more likely to be able to take the financial hit. But if you don't, you can't go on tour. And sometimes I'll be offered a gig in Europe, a festival, for example, and it just doesn't, I can't say yes because I'll just lose money doing it. And I just can't do that all the time.
Yeah. It's costing you jobs in the EU and in the UK?
Yep.
Thank you.
Can I just add a little bit to the red tape? Because I think sometimes when you complain about red tape, it sounds like, we all have to do red tape. I don't mind doing red tape and forms, and have to do that a lot in my job, and I have people that I employ that are really good at that. I think it can make a difference if you're on tour and the red tape holds you up. I mean, literally, if there's a delay with a carnet, you could miss a show and then miss a complete fee, and then the entire tour is in jeopardy. So it's not just we don't want to do forms. We are capable of doing forms. If we're not, we employ people that can do them for us. But it can actually affect the entire budget of the tour and make the tour even more difficult or impossible. Or you're cutting crew members, and that's another thing to think about. Is there's a lot of jobs in this industry. It's not just artists. I employ musicians, I employ sound engineers, lighting engineers. I have managers. I have manager, agent, lawyer, accountant. It's we're having to cut corners wherever we can, let go of people, and think about who we can even share the profit with. So I think it's already impacting a lot of people's jobs, and will continue to get worse if we don't find any helpful solutions and make things easier.
Thanks, Kate.
Have you had any direct experience of the 90 in 180 or crew members that or musicians that?
Yeah, well, I think, crew obviously are working with multiple artists. So I'm promoting my album, but my touring cycle is only so long and doesn't necessarily take up the whole year and isn't a full year's income for a crew member. So they might be working with other artists as well and going on multiple tours throughout the year. So then that can affect who I'm able to employ in terms of, are they actually able to do dates in Europe because of how many they've already done with other artists, not because they're not available. And I was going to add to what you were saying about the Robbie Williams tour, because it's not just difficult for the crew, that then is difficult for the entire show. Because when you change out crew, it's such a disruption to the tour, and people have to learn how the tour is working, and they might not be familiar with the equipment or how the band play or how the artist works or what's required on stage. So all of these delays can add stress and make people more tired, less sort of confident in their work. They're kind of overstretching themselves, doing jobs that aren't necessarily theirs. I've had to have new crew members in before, and my guitarist is teaching them things that actually it's not really their job to do. And then all of the additional time can actually add up to more finance for me that might not have been budgeted in. Because if you need extra days rehearsal to get crew used to working with the new band, if there are problems, you have to work them out. That's costly, and rehearsal rooms have doubled in price. So I can actually, when I played Glastonbury, I did a rehearsal and I'd already spent my fee before I got to the site.
As a British artist and someone who is proudly, and thank you for your opening, it was absolutely brilliant and inspirational. You're proudly going out and promoting our culture. But if you were in a situation where you had a huge European tour that was looking to last 6 months, would you look to employ musicians and crew that had EU passports to get over this hurdle? What would you do? What predicament would you find yourself in?
Yeah, I really, I've played with my musicians for 12 years, and I think that is quite rare as a solo artist. You see it less and less now because people are, just saying it's just not affordable. There has been times where, I could have cut my band. I could just go with backing tracks, but I've really built something I believe in, and we put on a really amazing show. And I think, I looked at artists like Elton John, and when I have seen him live and the relationship he has with his musicians on stage is so amazing and beautiful. And I think that's what I believe in, is there's something really special about playing music with people for a long period of time. It's hard to go into without sort of talking about magic and telepathy, but there's something that years and years of playing together and years of working together, as I'm sure you have your own experiences in a completely different way, just mean that you function really, really well. So I am always trying to put that first. That's a personal choice. I'm choosing not to sacrifice that integrity, but I do understand that I could profit more, maybe not go into debt sometimes. And I'm working on a record right now that's actually, exploring my Irish heritage, and I'm trying to figure out what to do, because to really play the record, I'd have to double the musicians that I have on stage. There's no way I can afford to do that. There's no way I can afford to play this record as it's meant to be played at the moment. I think, it makes me think about, in comparison, like merch companies, for example, it does I might not necessarily be looking for like band and crew in Europe. I know some artists would, and I think that that's okay, because it might be the only way to make it work. But for example, with merch, it's cheaper for me to get merchandise companies in Europe, because I need merch to make the shows profitable. Sometimes the only profit you're making is from the merch. So being charged on that and being limited on how much merch you can bring in means it's taking business away from the UK. And artists are definitely going to be looking at like companies in Europe, because otherwise they're just not going to be able to make the tour happen. And I'm making financial sacrifice, but it would be cheaper for me to hire crew and band in Europe. If I didn't care about the relationships that I have and the shows that I've built, I would just let go of them and move my business to Europe to make it easier.
Yeah, thank you, Kate.
And am I right in thinking that there are countries or territories who do have that sort of facility, like an export hub or an advisory office?
That's right. I think Canada and I think Australia have got quite, and as a result, their music industries have been boosted, because they're doing a really good job of exporting talent and supporting talent to go out and tour.
Seem to recall that as well. Thank you very much. Cam,
Roger.
we've answered your question.
Yeah.
Oh, very good.
Can I add to that? Sorry.
Of course, yes.
Yeah, I was just going to add that I think the music industry has shown with its actions and refusal to act, they're not going to help. There's a lot that people have been asking the industry to do to help musicians, that the major companies benefiting the most from artists and profiting the most off of our work, they don't come to the table. So just to answer your question about will the industry help, the answer is, in my opinion, no. They haven't refused to help on many issues that we've already been asking them for help with.
They should, you think?
I think they should help in lots of ways, yeah. I think that Live Nation, Spotify and the major labels are responsible for a lot of the, if not all of the other problems that are going on in the industry. I think they've been very destructive to artists and artists' lives and the future of potential young new artists even being able to have the dream of having a career in the music industry. I think they will not do it voluntarily, but we're being asked to take all of the risk, and then they're sharing in majority of the profit in quite extreme ways, in ways I think are unethical. When I talk to people in other industries about how the music industry works, they're often quite shocked. I think we need to point the floodlights at these major companies that profit from us and refuse to help.
Do you think that there's more the government could do to bring that to a head and bring about a different sort of set of solutions?
I do.
What would that look like?
If we're talking specifically about Brexit, I think there's quite simple things that we probably already even covered, with like merch costs and carnets and processing times. But in terms of the wider systemic problem, I would love to get back to you with like serious details of what I think could help, because I feel this is an entirely broken ecosystem. I don't know an artist that hasn't experienced sort of financial exploitation and unethical behaviour. And we don't have watchdogs. We don't have HR departments. We really don't have anyone. The people that are there to help us are usually the ones who are hurting us, to be honest. And I haven't seen anything like, apart from external bodies like the Music Venue Trust and the FAC, people actually trying to make a difference. None of it's coming from the major companies that are making all of the money.
Thank you, that's really helpful.
I've got some questions I want to move on to, but just before we do, on that's really interesting. And you mentioned Live Nation and Spotify, which are very different parts of the industry, I suppose. Yeah. So who could coordinate that? Could you get the three big record companies to try and pull everybody together to give advice and support to artists?
Like I said, I don't think it would have to be forced.
Yeah.
Because they don't do that. And I don't know why they don't do that. Because why aren't they helping artists earn money and have careers and tour? Why do artists eat all of the risk? But I would love to see them become responsible and actually create an environment for artists to flourish, create opportunity, nurturing the industry, not destroying it. Could there be specific grants that they're actually contributing to? I think they should be forced to share a split of their profits with grassroots venues of independent artists, or even just paying people fairly to begin with. And they are really separate companies, and they do really separate things, but they're very much linked. They're very much linked, all of them.
Yeah.
Do you mind if I just
go on, Naomi.
I'll just briefly comment
please
on
do.
that, just to say that I think that record labels used to provide more in terms of tour support for artists, which is like really invaluable investment. It used to be the case that you go on tour to promote the recording because the recording would make money. Now artists aren't making money from their recorded music, and so live music has to play a bigger part in kind of sustaining their careers. So with the cost of touring, it's becoming more difficult to do that. So it is getting harder and harder for artists to make a living.
Okay, Kate, Naomi, I think you both mentioned the issue of border checks and delays. Maybe if you could just give us a bit of an indication of how big a problem that is.
Well, I guess I can speak to, like if you're held up, first of all, it would be really hard to build in an extra day for additional travel on top, like to put 2 travel days into a tour. If you don't need it, would add thousands, because I would be paying, if there's 10 members of crew, everybody's wages for the day, plus an additional the driver cost and the bus rental, and then or if you're in a van, hotel costs, and all of the costs for these things have actually really gone up as well. And then if you're in a van, or you might be asked to, everybody has to get up at 4 a.m. and get out of the vehicle, and things have to be searched, and then that can affect people's well-being, ability to do their job, and just sort of it does cause quite a bit of disruption. And again, like worst case scenario, you're held up so much that you miss the show. I've seen that happen to bands before.
How often does that happen, those sorts of delays and issues caused by them?
We've had a lot of examples of that.
Kate, you mentioned I think you said you now source merchandise in Europe for your tours, is that right? And is that something that a lot of musicians are doing? I suppose, again, we would just want to get an indication of the problems that the merch rules cause.
Yeah.
For the
So if you're
musicians.
bringing in your own merch from the UK, there's a limit on how much you can bring in, which merch, as I said, can literally make or break a tour. It can stop it going into the red. It could actually enable you to profit. It's obviously something you can't quantify completely, or know exactly how much merch you're going to sell, but you can have an idea, especially if you've done a lot of touring. And the limitations on how much you can bring in from the UK mean that you're taking another financial risk. And so if you maybe can find a company in Europe that doesn't that isn't a UK company, because then you're not limited and you can get it delivered, that will mean that you can go on the tour or not.
Okay. And some artists, presumably, that plays into the idea that some artists are now just not touring the EU because of those sorts of problems,
I've heard people just say, what's the point, because it's just too... It's like, it is supposed to be our job. We love it, and it's passionate, and it's really fun and whatever, but it's also work, and it is our job, and we are supposed to earn from it.
Yeah.
Somewhere.
Naomi, you said earlier, I think, the issue of carnets could be resolved by the government without a whole new negotiation. So why haven't we done that? Why aren't we doing that?
Yeah, so I've got a great list of things that we could do unilaterally, because I think there's 2 elements to this. There's sort of, we actually have had a lot of engagement with the government about this issue, and we're having really regular meetings with DCMS officials about it.
I remember in COVID, we had a sort of Zoom, and everyone was saying all these doom and gloom things were going to happen post-Brexit. I mean, COVID was a big blow, as it was, and it sounds like, from what you're saying, this nightmarish bureaucratic landscape, but it's all come to pass. So I wanted to ask really about collaboration. So Tasmin Little, her email to me says, musicians need to be able to travel last minute for cancellations without worrying about carnets and visas. And we need to make it easier for international musicians to come here too. So I'm of an age where I remember things like Blur and Françoise Hardy doing a duet, and I think St. Etienne and Etienne Dahe. Kate and Naomi, well, in fact, all 3 of you, are you finding that these, Naomi, you mentioned cultural exchange, but these sort of cross-country collaborations are dying because of all this?
I would say they're very possible if you're on a major label, and outside of that, if you're an independent artist, a lot more difficult.
With all these things, it's the little guys who'll be hit hardest, who are being hit. Yeah.
You could be potentially the future big guys.
Yeah, that's true. You're choking off that talent stream that they would have grown.
I mean, so part of our work with the Cultural Exchange Coalition is to try and highlight some of the examples of brilliant projects that are happening sort of in spite of all the problems.
We won't just jump in a truck and head over to France, but we will, pre-Brexit, we would have completed much shorter tours, for example, of just 2 or 3 dates or 2 or 3 venues and coming back to the UK. Now we're having to pack in many more dates for a longer tour, which puts on a lot of pressure across the board, be on the orchestra and on players and on crew. So that's what we've seen drop off. Not necessarily the demand and the appetite or the actual appetite for the cultural exchange.
I would add to that it probably also really impacts support slots. So artists that get offered a support tour or being able to bring someone on the road, because you're not the headlining act, you're not paid anywhere near as much, but it can be a great opportunity to tap into somebody else's audience, but just probably impossible to do. I would imagine going to Europe from the UK on a support slot, so I just don't know how much money you need to make that work. I've had people, I've offered support slots to people where we've had them travel with us, and that's how it can be possible, but then they're just kind of doing it completely on their own, and it would be impossible otherwise for them to do it, you know.
The support act would be from the EU rather than getting someone... Because there
Well,
are lots of examples of when people were coming for the support and they, by the end of the tour, became bigger than the main act.
Yeah, I think that
Pixies and people like that,
Yeah.
historically.
like bands being able to go on the road together like that is definitely impacted, because for the support act, I just don't know how it would be possible to eat and pay for somewhere to sleep and, you know, do what you need to do to make the show happen.
And I was just reminded of the example of Trigger Cut. It was a German punk band. It was all over the news a couple of years ago that they were stopped at the border and sent packing, although they'd sold out a tour, because they didn't realise a bit of paper that every venue had to send. Is that kind of thing lessening now there's more awareness of this nightmarish jungle of paperwork, or is that still happening?
I think the reason that it's seen as a one-sided issue is because if you're coming from the EU, you're obviously just dealing with one set of rules. So I think the paid permitted engagement route for gigs is quite simple, but they probably had to get some evidence that of the engagement basically from each venue.
I asked a similar question to the previous panel in terms of the reduction of working class people working in the creative industries, and whether or not the impact of Brexit touring, etc., had an impact on reduction in terms of working class numbers. They said not really, but I think you were saying something else, Kate, and it'd be interesting to hear from everybody in terms of this. And what can we do, so there's my solution bit, to get more working class people able to be in the industry as well?
Okay. I think, yeah, like the problems domestically are impacting the problems like in the rest of the world. Like, I hope I've expressed how these are really interconnected and how they have a knock-on effect on each other. So as I was saying, like someone from a working class background with no disposable income who couldn't support themselves financially to make a show in London happen, let alone a tour domestically, let alone shows in Europe, because, you know, they might not have 600 quid. They might not have the costs, you know, money saved to be able to pay for a carnet. I think that working class people, no disposable income, no support financially from a major, from an OnlyFans, from whatever it is, like, are not going to be able to play shows in Europe. They're not going to be able to play shows here necessarily. I hope that answers the question, the first part of the question. And then what are we going to do to make, I mean, I don't know, like, why you would want to have a career in the music industry, apart from that you love music, and I think it's the best job in the world and I love what I do, but it's impossible. I don't know how Kate Nash now would start a career when I worked in Nando's and my mum was a nurse and I have no connections and no sort of disposable, like, financial support from parents. I really don't know how I would be able to do it. I don't think that I would have been able to have the career that I have if I was starting now. And I think that anything, like I said, that we could do to make getting to Europe easier would be great, but we also need to look at domestically, and these companies, like I keep banging on about, but that are making, you know, millions out of artists and making it impossible for them to have future careers. And, like, it's going to happen that these artists aren't going to exist. You know, I don't know what Glastonbury will look like in 20 years if we carry on like this. don't know it's going to be that interesting. Maybe there'll be more interesting worldwide acts and European acts, but I don't know what will happen to UK culture if we close the doors on making it accessible. It's so wrong. Like, I feel really emotional about it because I think it is so wrong. It's such a letdown. And they're exploiting people off of the work that they're doing, musicians, artists, and never getting involved in the conversation, never caring, never being willing to move at all on anything, not even being transparent about the deals that they've made, the majors and the streamers, pointing the finger at each other all the time, blaming. They're both responsible. They are both massively responsible, and so are Live Nation. They're making enough money to be able to financially contribute. And I think that they should be forced to financially contribute. I don't actually want them running it because I don't trust them. But I think that they should financially contribute to making an environment that, working class kids could go, oh, I can see a future here, because I tell you, they cannot see a future right now. It's just not possible. That's why I'm saying we're desperate, because I've seen those doors like closing. Sorry for the desperation. I just genuinely feel it.
It's really good. So you're kind of saying, like, years ago this wasn't the case, but now things have just been so much worse.
I hate that when I'm asked in interviews, what's your advice to young people? I'm like, it's way worse now. Why is it worse now? It should be better. There's actually there could be so many opportunities. I mean, it really should be better. I shouldn't be feeling this, because I think that, like, if things were different, it would be amazing right now to be a young up and coming artist with how much could potentially be at your fingertips, and like the exposure, the connection with fans, the way that you're able to build things, it could be so much better. It's not that, like, oh, it's over and, boo-hoo, like there's nothing we can do. No, there are things that we can do. And people need to start taking responsibility. The people profiting need to start taking responsibility. And the government, anything that you guys can do to make it easier financially across the, Europe and domestically would help. But it's not a simple solution. And it's a massive letdown to the entire country. And I do, we hold ourselves as this barometer of cool and culture. It's going to be gone. It's going to go away if we don't do something.
So kind of just wider on that, are there any other bits in terms of solutions that people want to kind of feed in to make sure that we're not missing anything? Because the expertise that you have had and the passion is really powerful.
Music industry is actually bigger than the fishing industry. In terms of kind of economic value to the UK, and you wouldn't know that when you hear about what the content of the negotiations has been. So I just think this issue is a manifesto commitment. It has to be prioritised in the negotiations. We've talked about youth mobility. We know the EU wanted that, for example. We've got to make sure when we're agreeing things with the EU that we make sure that we get this issue resolved as part of the package.
Okay. Yeah, I think just to kind of agree with you guys, it's take seriously the people that are making all the money for, that's the artists and the musicians. We don't earn all the money, but we make it possible for people to earn that money. And if we can profit from our work, we can actually contribute more, and the ecosystem could flourish.
Brilliant. Thank you all for your time today. Great to see you.